such a stupid question.
That's how they vote in
crooked,
California.
just like you're crooked. Your press is crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked.
To be fair, I'm not crooked.
Let's call it quits, because I've had enough. Thank you, darling. Have a good time.
Mr. President.
We have a forum. We're right now on budget, under budget, and ahead of schedule.
You doubled.
I doubled the size of it, you dumb person.
The name calling by this president to me is just absolutely astounding.
Who speaks like that? Not even just the president of the United States, but he's not even using full sentences.
President Trump took on the fake news media, and President Trump is winning. Look at the results so far.
Signed legislation to cut all taxpayer funding to woke and biased NPR and PBS, and they're sort of gone now, I guess.
Today marks the first day without federal funding for public media, a serious setback for the entire PBS system.
Tonight, for the first time in modern history, the press room at the Pentagon is virtually empty. The journalists left after an unprecedented demand for control over their journalism by the Trump administration.
Dozens of journalists assigned to cover the nation's military turned in their security passes and are no longer welcome.
CBS is under new ownership, and soon enough, CNN is going to have new ownership as well.
The lawsuit we're filing today seeks to block this consolidation, which will undermine competition, drive up prices for consumers, and weaken the local journalism that our communities depend upon.
We have just learned that the Washington Post is laying off its entire sports department and most of its overseas journalists.
I just got laid off from my job at CBS.
After 7 long years of welcoming you to the weekend, our time here is coming to a close.
And so for one last time, that is the CBS Evening News. I'm Maurice Dubois.
Let's just be clear, the result of anti-DEI, segregation.
When you have journalists being arrested for reporting, when you have truth tellers being held captive, we are under a state of emergency.
The threat is not coming, friends. It is here.
I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way.
Don Lemon arrested.
Last night, the DOJ sent a team of federal agents to arrest me in the middle of the night for something that I'd been doing for the last 30 years.
Georgia Fort arrested.
All right, you guys, I gotta go. They're knocking.
Yeah, she's coming right now.
Karen Atia fired from the Washington Post.
It sends a chilling message to say, if we can do that to her, we can do that to anyone else.
And me more than a year ago. All of us shown the door for just doing our jobs. You cannot have democracy without journalism.
No one really has a playbook for what it means to be an independent journalist. We're all just trying to figure it out.
We are not shrinking, we are growing. So be louder, be bolder.
Change is not an ending, it's an evolution.
So you asked me why I bought the Rook? It's to cover stories like this for Black people, by Black people, and about Black people.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage NABJ President Aaron Haynes.
We feeling revolutionary today, NABJ? All right, good morning. Welcome to Atlanta. Welcome to the city that raised me, shaped me, and taught me what Black power can look like when it is visible, organized, and unapologetic. Welcome to our revolution. Now, this year's theme, in case you haven't already heard me say it, is truth, power, and Black journalism. It's not simply a reflection of the moment that we are in. It is a statement about who we have always been. Now, we are gathered in Atlanta at a time of profound challenge. Our profession is being reshaped by economic instability. Consolidation and layoffs are disproportionately affecting Black journalists and reducing the number of people inside newsrooms with the experience and the perspective to cover our communities accurately. And we are living through a crisis of trust in which disinformation often moves faster than the truth, and in which the people with the most power are frequently the least interested in being held accountable. Our presence continues to change the questions that get asked, the stories that get covered, and the people who are understood as central to the American story. That is our promise. Now, over the past year, my first as your president, I have tried to lead NABJ with both the challenge and the promise of this moment in mind. We have strengthened our advocacy for Black journalists that are facing attacks on their work, their rights, and their credibility. We have spoken in defense of press freedom and journalist safety. We have expanded NABJ Cares because our members need more than statements of solidarity when jobs disappear, when careers are disrupted, and when the pressures of this profession become personal. We have launched the Jubilee Endowment Campaign because an organization that is entering its next 50 years must be able to invest in its membership, to protect our independence, and to build a future that is larger than any single presidency or convention. I'm proud of that work, but I'm even more aware of just how much remains unfinished. NABJ can not only be the organization that Black journalists turn to when we are in crisis. We must also be the place where Black journalists come to imagine what is possible. We must help our members to navigate disruption, but we must also help you lead innovation. We must defend Black journalists inside institutions, but we must also support those who are building institutions of your own. Yeah. We must respond when our members are harmed, but we also have to create the conditions in which they can thrive. And we must understand that our role extends beyond professional development. So our responsibility then is not only to preserve Black journalism as it has existed, it is to help to shape what it becomes next. That means fighting for ownership. It means fighting for leadership. It means fighting for resources. And it means demanding that Black journalists are not only brought in to explain crisis, but trusted to define coverage, set priorities, and make decisions. It means preparing the next generation not only to enter this profession, but to transform it, and so many of you already are. So over the next several days, we will gather not simply to reflect on the state of our profession, but to help determine its future. We will celebrate our excellence. We will confront our challenges, and we will remind one another that we are not powerless in this moment. Revolution is not only about protest. Revolution is creation. It is building what does not yet exist. And it is refusing to accept that disruption must also lead to disappearance. We are gathered here in Atlanta because the truth matters. We are here because power must be examined. We are here because Black journalism has never been more necessary. And we are here because the future of this profession will not be decided without us. NABJ, this is our truth, this is our power, and this is our revolution. So welcome to Atlanta, and welcome to NABJ 2026. All right, folks, let's get to work. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very busy agenda this session alone. Veteran journalists Joyanne Reed and Tiffany Cross are going to help moderate discussions. This morning, we're going to hear from the parents of Mississippi teen Nolan Wells. They'll be here with civil rights attorney Ben Crump and the Reverend Al Sharpton. This morning, we'll also speak with Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones and the executive director of the African American Policy Forum, Kimberly Crenshaw. But first, NABJ, please help me welcome to the stage House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. All right, now do you want to go ahead and get your Knicks references out of the way before we get started, or what? All of y'all get it out of your system right now before we get started.
Orange and blue skies.
Now, also, before we get started, I should note that this audience can submit questions online. So what you want to do is you want to look for the prompt to do so on your NABJ app. It's under the Newsmaker Plenary event, okay? All right, well, Leader Jeffries, let's get started. Now, you're about 82 days out from the midterm elections, which are going to decide which party controls Congress. But today you're here with us in Atlanta, Georgia, in a room full of Black journalists. What is your message to this audience in this moment?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Erin, for your leadership, and to NABJ. Thank you for what you do. This is a moment of peril, but a moment when the press overall, and I think the Black press in particular, is needed. Your independence, your voice, your authenticity, and your connection to the communities that you cover, as well as to the country. Our journey as African Americans, of course, has been a freedom struggle from the very beginning, and we've been on a long walk toward freedom with fits and starts, with progress and backlash that has been, the reality of our walk over the last 250 years. But every step of the way, the Black press, in covering that journey authentically, has been an important part of making sure that truth is being spoken to power. And we need truth spoken to power now more than ever.
Yeah. And what do you see the role of Black journalists in doing that, especially with the truth being under attack and under threat from the highest levels of our government?
Well, in my view, what we're dealing with in terms of the opposition right now is three diabolical elements. Facts don't matter. Hypocrisy is not a constraint to their behavior. These extremists will say one thing and then they'll do the exact opposite. And I'm convinced that they believe that shamelessness is a superpower. So when you're dealing with that kind of adversary, or at least that kind of entity, the Trump cartel, sitting in the White House, highest office in the land, then being unbought, unbossed, unafraid in terms of speaking truth to power in that regard is going to be critically important. Now, I think the American people aren't buying what they're selling, because we've seen historic disapproval across almost every measure, right? That's general disapproval, that's the economy, certainly that's healthcare, even immigration enforcement, and certainly this reckless and costly war of choice in Iran.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to go back in time a little bit, because when you came into Congress in 2013, John Boehner was the House Speaker. Nancy Pelosi was in your position now as Minority Leader, and you were 44 years old. A lot of people saw you as a firebrand progressive coming in with a lot of big ideas on criminal justice, on
I think I was 42, but not that I'm...
Well, fact check me. Economic opportunity, on generational change. Do you recognize that progressive platform in what the progressive wing of your party is fighting for now?
Yeah, I do think that we are in an important moment of generational change. Mm-hmm. And, I give a lot of credit to Speaker Pelosi, then Majority Whip Clyburn, Majority Leader Hoyer, who in 2022 decided that they were going to voluntarily pass the baton to the next generation of House Democrats across the board in leadership and beyond. So that's a transition that, of course, is necessarily underway. And I've always thought about the House of Representatives. It's a special institution. It's the institution that the framers decided to be the closest, wanted to be the closest to the American people, reflect the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, the fears, the concerns, the anxieties, the life experiences, and the passions of the American people. I think it was Madison who said the House should be an intimate sympathy at its best with the American people. And so in order for that to happen, I think transition, change, renewal will continue to be an important part of the story. And that energy is being brought to the House in a variety of different ways, including from our progressive members.
Yeah, I think we could see that with these midterm elections in November. You've got the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, with several candidates who are on the ballot headed into these midterm elections. Your thoughts on what that energy, how that represents some of the change that you are talking about that's happening in the progressive wing of your party?
Yeah, so I think we'll see, what happens in terms of what the caucus looks like on the other side of the midterm elections. Certainly our focus right now is making sure that we win as many seats as we can in November, flip as many red seats blue, and take the gavels back so we can actually function like a check and balance on an out-of-control administration, as opposed to what Republicans have been doing, which is a reckless rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda, entirely inconsistent with the vision of the House of Representatives. I mean, it was interesting. King Charles, when he came to the Congress, joint addressed, to the House and to the Senate, stood there as a king and referenced the Magna Carta as the principle and foundation for the notion in America that executive power is subject to checks and balances. And of course, when he said that, everybody on the House side, the Democratic side of the House, stood up and gave him a rousing ovation. But then I looked over to the other side of the aisle, the Republican side, and they stood up and gave him a standing ovation. And I was very confused, y'all, because King Charles was talking about them and their failure to actually bring to life this principle. So we're going to do that. That'll connect all House Democrats, whether those are New Dems, progressives, or blue dogs. But I think most importantly, everybody is focused on the notion that life is too expensive in the United States of America. There's far too many people. Certainly this is the case in our community, in the black community, who are working hard, they're playing by the rules, but they can't thrive and they can barely survive. And that's got to change. And so we have to make life more affordable, more comfortable for the American people. And that's what unites every part of the House Democratic Caucus.
Yeah. Well, I will say there's one thing I want to ask about, and that is aid for Israel, because that may be one of the most contentious issues in your caucus. Many members, including you, have said that they want that aid to come with conditions. But what do you say to others who want to cut that aid off completely?
Well, I think that that's certainly a conversation that we're going to have about what's the appropriate way to bring to life, I think, some principles that pretty much everybody within the House Democratic Caucus, and I think America agrees with. The way I would articulate it is like this. One, we believe in a safe and secure Israel, right, or Israel's right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state. We also believe in an independent Palestinian state that for far too long has been denied, and that should be able to provide dignity and self-determination for the Palestinian people. And then the question becomes, how do you bring those two principles to life in a part of the world that has been contested for thousands of years? And I think what is clear in terms of what needs to be done is that, one, you've got to reconstruct Gaza. You've got to allow new Palestinian leadership to emerge. Hamas has got to be out. You got to figure out how you can economically invest in Gaza and the West Bank, in ways that allow the Palestinian community to thrive on a pathway toward a independent state. And then you got to figure out, how to make sure that people who have been breaking the law, U.S. law, are held accountable. And certainly that's the case with respect to settler violence in the West Bank that's out of control.
Yeah. Well, I want to stay on the DSA for a minute, because they're pushing a lot of these progressive candidates, and many of them are loud about getting big money out of politics. What do you make of that push? What is your thought about that?
I think that we have to end Citizens United. And one of the things, there's been a series of Supreme Court decisions that have eroded democracy in America. Ending Citizens United was perhaps the first. That came in 2010. Then in 2013, you had the Supreme Court in the Shelby County case decimate Section 5. That was the initial attack on the Voting Rights Act, decimate Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Then a few years after that, you had the Supreme Court declare that partisan gerrymandering is all, fair in the political sphere, and that there's nothing to prohibit it in the Constitution. And then you had, I think, the final devastating two decisions, most recently by the Supreme Court, which is one, of course, completely gutting the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in the most recent Calais decision. And then the decision that I think has unleashed this unprecedented corruption on the country is in the Trump v. United States case, where they gave the president basically complete immunity as if he was a king. So you have a series of systematic decisions going over the last 15 plus years that have really decimated sort of our democratic fabric, and we've got to unravel all of it. But Citizens United, I think, was the first, and we support full repeal of Citizens United. You can only bring that about in two different ways, either a constitutional amendment or a change in the Supreme Court. I think we're open to aggressively pursuing both.
Got it. I want to let you all know you should still, for those of you who may have come in, please, you can ask questions. You can submit your questions by using the app that is your NABJ app. You can go under Newsmaker Plenary and you can submit your questions. Keep those coming, and we're going to try to get to some of those in just a bit. So, Leader Jeffries, even if your party wins back the majority in November, that won't change the White House. President Trump will still be in office. You've talked about your two sides, seeing your two sides. You talked about seeing the Democratic Party coming together on the other side of November, but do you see possibly Democrats and Republicans being able to come together to accomplish anything substantial for the American people, even in this new climate?
Yeah, I think we have to try, anchored in the premise that Donald Trump has broken every single promise that he's made to the American people of consequence. He promised to lower costs on day one. Costs haven't gone down, costs have gone up. As a direct result of Trump policies, including his tariffs that have increased costs on everyday Americans, people in our community and beyond, by thousands of dollars per year. He promised that immigration enforcement was going to target the worst of the worst. But immigration enforcement has basically unleashed ICE brutality on American citizens like Alex Freddie and Renee Nicole Good, in those instances, killing them in cold blood. And certainly ICE brutality violently targeting law-abiding immigrants all across the country. I was just with several in New Jersey connected to Delaney Hall earlier in this week. He broke that promise. He promised to release the Epstein files, broke that promise. We forced a vote on the issue. About half the files have been released, the other half still being subjected to a cover-up by the Department of Justice. Donald Trump promised, right, to love and cherish Medicaid, then enacted the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, costing about 14 million Americans their health care and devastating hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health clinics in our communities and in rural America, the heartland of America, and all across America. And then lastly, of course, this guy promised that he was in office not to start endless wars in the Middle East, but to stop them. And then turned around and got us involved in the reckless war of choice in Iran. So he's broken every promise that he's made. Now, down the stretch, we've made clear to the American people, we're fighting for an affordable America. And we've said that looks like three different things: on costs, on care, and then on corruption. On costs, we got to lower the cost of groceries, of gasoline, of housing, because life is far too expensive. On healthcare, we've said, look, this is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We've got to make healthcare affordable for every single American, and that's our commitment. Reverse the damage that's been done and then build something better. And then on corruption, our view has been, I don't know that we'll get partnership on corruption, but we'll try to seek some common sense Republicans, the few that are left in Washington, to work with us on costs and on health care. But on corruption, we've said, if you've got people in office who are focused primarily in enriching themselves, their family, their friends, and their donors, then they're not focused on making life more affordable for the American people. And so from beginning on day one, we're going to hold the crooks accountable. These are the explicit promises that we're making to the American people, and we have a responsibility to try to bring that about. And if we're in a divided government scenario, we can do the accountability stuff in the majority on our own, holding gavels and subpoena power. But in terms of actually moving legislation that makes life better for the American people, we'll need a handful of Republicans to join us. Now, we've forced Republicans to join us in the House on a variety of different issues, including extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years on our terms, forced that vote, and then won that vote in January, I think in the majority, we'll have the ability to do more.
Well, I want to back up to before day one and think about the other side of the November election, because, you know, in 2020, when you were able to regain control, there was an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Are you concerned about possible backlash after the November election?
Well, I think we're operating under the premise that the Trump administration and that Republicans have adopted voter suppression as an electoral strategy. And they're going to do everything they can to try to rig the election in their favor. We've already seen that through the gerrymandering efforts. And then the Supreme Court aided and abetted the MAGA extremists by unleashing Jim Crow-like tactics in the South. And, you know, we've seen that now in Tennessee and in Louisiana and in Alabama. Certainly in Alabama, Shamari figures running hard, and I believe he's going to hold that seat, but making it very difficult for the African-American community to elect a candidate of their choice in all three places. Certainly that's the case in Tennessee and in Louisiana, with Cleo Fields deciding not to seek re-election as a result of what has happened. So we're operating under the premise that we've got to put together the largest voter protection effort in the history of the country. And that's what we've been doing. House Democrats, Senate Democrats, Democratic Governors Association, the Democratic Attorney Generals Association, the Democratic Secretaries of State Association, and then working in concert with civil society, the faith community, civil rights groups, organized labor, as well as civil liberties groups and good government groups. It will be the largest voter protection effort in the history of the country. That's to make sure that the right to vote is fully vindicated. And the press's role in exposing these efforts and the schemes that's coming from the other side is going to be important, so that the American people have full visibility into what the other side is trying to do. They can't defend their record, and so they're going to try to alter the landscape electorally, and we can't let it happen.
Well, I mean, is some of that coalition building, some of the concern I hear you voicing, is that because in part you may be worried that the president could declare a national emergency, as he has not ruled out doing ahead of the 2026 election?
Yeah, I think we've always viewed this as a three-dimensional battle: legislative battle, litigation battle, and then a battle for the hearts and minds of the American people and communities all across the country. And we got to be able to do all three. And we have been doing all three, and we've got to continue at the highest level of vigilance in that regard. Listen, anything is possible. I was there on January 6th and on the House floor. And I'll never forget, you know, that day, and it's a day that no American should ever forget. It was a violent insurrection. And I was seated in the leadership section at the time, and I was the number 5 Democrat, the chair of the House Democratic Caucus at the time. And there was a debate that was going on. I think it was to certify the results from Arizona, because we proceed in alphabetical order. And the Sergeant at Arms interrupts the debate and says the mob has breached the Capitol. They're on the 2nd floor. So everybody needs to be prepared to hit the ground and secure the gas masks that are underneath your seats. Now, I got to be honest, y'all. I was in Congress at that point, a little over 4 terms. I had no idea there were gas masks underneath each and every seat. So I'm thinking to myself, damn, this is a situation right now. And, you know, eventually we were all evacuated. And then obviously we saw what unfolded. And this was an intentional effort to halt the peaceful transfer of power, never before seen in American history. And if it's happened before, as Jim Clyburn, the great Jim Clyburn, often says, it can happen again. And so we'll be prepared.
Yeah. Well, what happens if you don't win?
Failure is not an option. And look, if the Knicks just won the championship for the first time in 53 years, the Democratic comeback can take place.
I set myself up for that one. So look, you've got progressives saying they want leadership. Democratic voters are saying they want a fighter. How do you feel like you've earned their support?
Yeah, well, I've been proud of the effort that's been underway by House Democrats from the very beginning, but it's not been easy. It's been tough because the moment is tough for the American people. And what I think we've talked about as House Democrats is, look, we have to continue to stretch. We're in a more is more environment. And because of the unprecedented extremism being unleashed on the American people, we have to be in a position to do more and do more differently and do more creatively. And that's what we've tried to do. It's both, right, stopping the extremism whenever and wherever possible from being unleashed on the American people, and then articulating a forward vision for what we believe needs to be done in this country, fighting for an affordable America, holding the crooks accountable, affordability, accountability, cost care, corruption. And I think after the 2024 election, there were a lot of people who were understandably, including Democrats, asking the question, has the party forgotten how to win? This happened again. And now we all have to deal with the fallout from him coming back into office. I think what we have shown collectively, and this is because of the American people over the last 18 plus months, is that we've won every meaningful election up and down the ballot across the country, at the local level, at the city level, at the county level, and certainly at the state level. I think there's something like 31 legislative seats that have changed hands over the last 18 months. All 31 of those seats have been won by Democrats. Republicans haven't flipped a single seat. And we've seen, movements emerge and different type of candidates get elected in New York City, in New Jersey, in Virginia, Prop 50 in California, across the board. So I do think that we've turned a corner, but we, of course, have to finish the job. And finishing the job is not the November midterm elections. That's just the beginning of the end. It's not the end. We can cut his presidency legislatively in half by winning the midterm elections, and that's incredibly important. But then we've got to turn this situation around. And by the way, I should just say, this is not all political. We are in a backlash moment, and the people in this room have been on the wrong side of that backlash, as have many in our community across the country. But we're in a backlash moment in America, and we've seen from the very beginning of our journey, whenever progress is made in this country, it often triggers a backlash. And we had the progress of emancipation, the progress of Reconstruction. And then after 13 or 14 years, that progress is short-circuited by a backlash and the rise of Jim Crow, the rise of the KKK, the lynching epidemic, Plessy versus Ferguson. And it takes almost 100 years to unravel that backlash. And then a new generation emerges, civil rights heroes and foot soldiers, to usher in a new era of progress for our community and for America through the civil rights legislation that was historic, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, Fair Housing Act, Great Society programs that Dr. King and others fought for, Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965, things of that nature. But then that immediately is followed by a backlash with the election of Richard Nixon in 1968, who ran on a platform of capitalizing on the anxiety to all the progress that had just been made. And then in his first term, declares a war on drugs, which is a war on us. And when he declares drug abuse public enemy number one in his first term, in the summer of 1971, there are less than 300,000 people incarcerated in America. Today, about 2.2 million, disproportionately Black, Latino, or low income of every race. Progress, followed by backlash. And then you have what I believe was a third moment of progress in this country, and that's the election of Barack Obama. Historic election. Incredible thing for us to go from the outhouse to the White House. And of course, it represented significant progress, and some incredible things, including the Affordable Care Act, were accomplished. And our children being able to look at a President Obama, a First Lady Michelle Obama, their eloquence, their brilliance, their class, their character. Of course, Sasha, Malia, and Grandma all being up in the White House as well. What an incredible thing, that progress. But you remember, many were asking the question at the time, does this mean that America has now entered into a post-racial phase? That's the question, Roland remembers, that was being asked at the time. Those of us who have studied history know that though it was meaningful progress, it also meant that it was about to trigger a ferocious backlash. And that's exactly the moment that we're in right now. And we've got to show up with character and courage and conviction to get through it.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to a couple of questions from the audience if we can. You talked about the Voting Rights Act. We've got a question asking, why didn't Congress pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act between 2021 and 2023 when it was introduced and Democrats held majority in all three branches? And if you all are victorious in November, should you be the next speaker, would this be one of your first priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. I've said that publicly on the campaign trail, on the Florida House, and all across America. And just a nuance to that question, the House did pass the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act under the leadership of Terry Sewell and the CBC, not once, but twice. We sent it over to the Senate, not once, but twice, including when we had the trifecta and Joe Biden was president. And unfortunately, you had though we had 51 Democrats, there were 2 Democrats at the time. I guess they maybe have been independents caucusing with the Democrats, who chose not to create an exception to the filibuster in order to allow voting rights to be fully brought to life in the United States of America. And that was a mistake. And what we've seen from the other side is that when they have power, they use it. And so I think one of the lessons has to be, when we have the ability to move forward and get meaningful things done, we've got to use it. And President Obama, by the way, here in Atlanta in 2020, during John Lewis's funeral, pointed out, President Obama, that the filibuster is a relic of the past and needs to be reformed. Yeah. And we certainly support filibuster reform.
Well, talking about reform, we have another question. It's about the Supreme Court. You mentioned 2 ways that the Supreme Court could be overhauled. Could you expand on that? And are Democrats prepared to take action on that now?
In my view, dramatic Supreme Court reform is necessary. And, I'm going to leave it to the Democrats on the Judiciary Committee, led by Jamie Raskin, who will be the next chair if the American people give us the ability to govern on their behalf in the majority. And there's a variety of different options that are on the table, and I think that we can't foreclose any single one of them. The Supreme Court, the conservative right-wing majority on the Supreme Court has become, basically a subsidiary of the MAGA Republican Party. That's what that decision in Calais said to me. And then they turned around when a court in Alabama, right, a 3-judge panel in Alabama, found that the new map that Alabama Republicans wanted to put in place that would gut the second Black opportunity to elect district, the district that Shamari Figures now holds. That 3-judge panel said that it was an attack, a racially motivated attack on black voters in Alabama. One of those judges, I believe, was appointed by Ronald Reagan, and the other two were appointed by Donald Trump. If a 3-judge federal panel appointed by Republican judges, 2 of whom were appointed by the current president, could conclude that that was a racially motivated map attacking black voters, and the Supreme Court steps in and overturns that decision, it tells me that they don't have the credibility for us to move forward acting like everything is okay and the status quo is acceptable. It's not, and we're going to push for dramatic reform of the Supreme Court.
Well, Leader Jeffries, thank you again for coming here, being with us, answering some of the questions from the black journalists in the room, and talking here with me.
Thank you, Erin.
You got it. Thank you.
And now, please welcome host of the Joy Ann Reid Show, Joy Ann Reid. Along with Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones and the executive director of the African American Policy Forum, Kimberly Crenshaw.
Hello, NABJ. Now, look, I would be a bad business owner if I didn't shout out the Joy Reid Show family that is watching us on the live stream. So shouts out to the Joy Reid Show fam that are watching right now. Thank you, ladies, for being here. So I want to start just by kind of giving you all a chance to react to what we just heard. And get each of your thoughts about whether it seems to you that the leader of the Democratic caucus in the House really perceives the intensity of the battle within the party between the progressives and the moderate wing of the party. I'll start with you, Nicole.
Oh, Lord, why start with me?
Because
she
morning.
knows you. Good morning. Good morning. You start with the one who doesn't have a poker face. I've been thinking a lot about the era of Reconstruction. And leading up to Reconstruction, we had a progressive wing of the Progressive Party at that time, the radical Republicans. So, of course, Republicans were considered the Progressive Party. And the radical Republicans had the audacity to think that slavery could end. Called directly for the abolition of slavery, not for gradual emancipation, not for trying to appease the other side, not for trying to make friends with people who thought that slavery should continue. They pressed very hard for full equality, to punish the insurrectionists, and for complete liberation of enslaved people. We don't consider that a radical position now. Right now, we consider that to be the position the nation should have had. So it's not new that we see this war between kind of the status quo of the party that wants to appease, that wants to maintain power, and those who really see a radical liberatory view for the nation. So I think we should just all look at efforts to suppress what is being treated as radical positions of the Democratic Party as also historical, as something that we have continuously seen, and that years from now, we may very well see folks who are now embracing those once radical views, right? Like if I didn't think I had a lot to say, but I do. So I'm gonna wrap it up. If you truly want to see transformation transformation seldom comes from the middle. It seldom comes from appealing to the middle. It comes from actually having a vision for a society that is uncomfortable for a lot of people, but having to force your people also within your own party to see that vision. And you have also seen, I mean, there were fights on the floor of Congress, like physical fights over the radical Republicans. Charles Sumner, right, gets beaten in the head with a cane for daring to think that black people should be free. So as we're covering this as journalists, we should understand that we also, as journalists, are creating a narrative. We're creating a narrative about this war. We're creating a narrative about who's right. We're creating a narrative about where the country should be and if the excesses of the left went too far. And so we're deserving of this correction. And so as journalists, we should be questioning the narratives that are being put out by those in power, but also the narratives that we ourselves are creating. That's all I got to say on that. Okay.
No, I think that was it. It's important to frame it that way. I mean, Kimberly Crenshaw, I mean, the notion of critical race theory was made to appear radical. The idea that you could look at the law through the lens of race and filtered through the history of race in this country was deemed too radical.
Exactly.
To be, for children to be exposed to as if they were, and they're not, and other than if they're children in law school. But we are living in a world in which Georgia Fort and Don Lemon had to file to vacate their indictments because 40 mainly black people had a protest and they covered it as journalists.
Exactly.
So we're in a radical place right now in terms of the reaction. So I wonder how you feel about the idea of moderation, and I heard the minority leader really focus on the victories that Democrats have had in the number of races they won, and as he said, from all wings of the party are winning local elections, sort of focusing on victories, electoral victories, as proof that we're beating back the true radicalism of the far right.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a lens that makes sense to you?
Yeah. Well, I start with exactly where Nicole started. I read this moment through the lens of the last time black people were pushed outside of this democracy, the last time there was election, and the party in power, which had been the party that we were connected to, associated with, and made possible their power. The last time this happened was the election of 1876. And at that moment, the Republican Party decided that in exchange to maintain power, they were going to give us up. They were going to throw us under the bus. And that's exactly what they did. And we stayed under the bus in a state of racial tyranny for 7 decades. So when I hear the conversation about moderation and underlying that, a general sense that this moment is a correction to the overcorrection. In other words, racial justice discourse and the efforts to really create a truly multiracial democracy went too far. I go back to the Redeemers who said Reconstruction, 8 years of us having pseudo-citizenship was too much. It was too far. So when I hear this, I'm hearing the Redeemers of the 19th century. I'm hearing the massive resistors of 1954. I hear the MAGA anger right now about a black president in the White House and black people getting too far. So strategically, my worry is when we are in an asymmetrical war. And let's be clear, this is a counter-revolution that is purging black people from everywhere. We are losing in media, in education, in entertainment, in the military. The most powerful African Americans in the military were summarily fired. So when I hear moderation in the face of a radical effort to purge us from everywhere and then take away our ability to actually name the purging. So they purged the language about discrimination, anti-blackness, bias, inclusion. So the language is being taken away as well as our bodies being taken away. I think we're not up to the challenge at this moment if this is what our leadership is telling us the war is really about.
And I think journalism is in a fragile place in this moment, particularly for black journalists. I mean, I cannot imagine the 1619 Project being created today. I can't imagine it being greenlit today. We're in such a nadir that we can't even properly talk about race or use, as you said, language that's coded in race. There are organizations, nonprofits, taking the word black out of their name in order to try to get grant funding. How does journalism respond in this moment in a way that meets the moment, given the restrictions that so many journalists that are sitting in this room likely feel in their newsrooms, but needing to describe the thing that they're seeing and experiencing?
That's a question for me.
Yes, ma'am.
How should we,
Yeah,
or how are we?
Well, give me both of those. How are we, in your view, and how should we?
So, Joy, I know you know as a longtime journalist, I know the people in this room as journalists know that it has always been a struggle for us to treat the covering of racism, the racial infrastructure of this country as more than a fad. So we know we go through periods where usually when there's some combustible circumstance like George Floyd or, Abner Louima, or name your crisis, and newsrooms then discover once again, oh, race is an issue. We need to hire some black folks to cover race. And then they get tired of it, right? Society gets tired of it. The newsrooms get tired of it. And then we see a purging of those beats. We see a downgrading of the status of the journalists whose expertise was covering those. And we're certainly in a moment like that right now. Even though we are living under the most openly white nationalist administration of my 50-year lifetime, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Even though we are in a society where we're being told it was the identity politics of the left that got us here, and yet the Trump administration is running on nothing but identity politics.
That's right.
They're white identity politics, and so we see the white as invisible, but it is an identity politics. We're not treating this enough as a racial story, right? And as people, reporters who need specific expertise in race. Like, just because you have a race doesn't mean you know how to cover race. Race is an expertise, and those of us who are good at it have studied it, and that's why we're good at it. So we're seeing, again, I mean, you look at all of the black verticals that were created after George Floyd, they're all gone. You look at the decimation of black reporters who are covering race, many of them are gone or they've been demoted. And we've seen this pattern. I mean, I've only been a journalist for 20-something years, but I've seen this pattern again and again, so we all knew it was coming. But it doesn't make it any less devastating that in this moment where we need a racial analysis, like, the reason we're seeing an attack on democracy is because the demographics of our country are shifting. And folks want democracy if they know they will be in charge. And if they think they won't, they don't actually care about democracy that much, right? That's why we've only had it for 60 years. But you don't have enough folks who are able to constantly do that analysis. And so we treat these as separate stories. We're going to write about politics, then we're going to write about race. Race is the politics. And you have to have a political reporting class who can do that with sophistication and not treat these as separate stories. Yeah. That's where we are. So in the answer of where we are is also the answer of what we should be doing. But you're absolutely right. It's a completely different environment. I honestly can't imagine even trying to pitch the 1619 right now. Now, I can't say whether it would get approved or not, but I think I know myself as a journalist, the atmosphere that would be inviting to pitching something like this. And I think it would be very challenging in any newsroom in this country to pitch something like the 1619 Project.
You know, I think about the fact that part of the openness to even a consideration in the mainstream media to something like 1619 Project came out of tragedy, came out of George Floyd's murder. And there's this opening that happens in the world in which there's a small window in which it was sort of almost a reconstruction moment. We want to hear your stories. We want to know more of your stories. That moment is obviously closed, and the door has been slammed shut on it. But it opened again to me a little bit because of Gaza. There wasn't a lot of conversation specifically about Gaza, but Gaza not just as an issue that impacted Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, but Black Americans. Particularly a lot of young Black Americans who were open to a kind of progressivism that was born out of that struggle. That's not even in the United States. But the fact that the Democratic Party is still really wrestling with whether leadership is comfortable with the activism around Gaza that has fueled so much of the progressive left, including Black progressives. How do you read that? Just as you're looking at it in a sort of social science way, it's like it seems that issue is still too painful for a party that, to be honest, is still very much reliant on donations from organizations that are very married to Israel.
Yeah. Well, I think what the story is telling us is that the moral imperatives behind building a truly inclusive multiracial democracy, the moral imperatives behind the basic human rights platform has taken not only a back seat, it's just been erased in this moment. So the consequences are widespread. The consequences help facilitate the erasure of these values, but most particularly the erasures of Black people. There is an anti-Blackness that is afoot now that has run rampant, and the media it's not just the media isn't reporting on it, the media is facilitating it. Yeah. So, I wanted to just run an experiment. And I call this the tale of two college presidents. Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell you a story about two college presidents, right? One is a Black woman and one is a white man. And I want you to guess which one actually experienced the thing that I'm about to talk about. So the Black woman is accused of unprofessional citation practices. This unprofessional citation practice gets cited by the New York Times 13 times in 10 days, creating what appears to be a firestorm, seeking her removal. It is initially a story that is seeded in the far-right newspapers, knowing that they can count on the paper of record to pick it up, and thus extend their strategy of attacking Black people, knowing that the mainstream media will pick it up. There's another college president who's accused of distorting data. We're not talking about citation practice. We're talking about making stuff up. I would use another word for it, but I'm my mama's daughter, I'm gonna be polite, but making it up. Now, one of them doesn't get any newspaper coverage at all and is allowed to quietly resign. The other one not only is humiliated and removed, but she now becomes a context-setting rehearsal every time there's a question about whether Black people deserve to be where they are. Now, you know the name of the first president, right? Everybody can repeat it. Claudine Gay. Have you ever heard of the name Mark Trevor Tessier Levine? No. You don't know his name? No. This is the white president of Stanford University.
Unbelievable.
Removed for falsifying data. Now, there's just so much that this is telling us about media's facilitation. They are not just reporting. They are making the strategy of the far right to bring white Christian nationalism and its particular target against Black bodies in high spaces to the center of American democracy, right? Relying on them to basically do the dirty work. We have all experienced this dirty work because when people come after our work, we are no longer able to respond. We are now subjects. We're no longer agents. We can no longer actually do interviews. We're not part of the coverage, but those who are behind this, they get interviewed by Ezra Klein. They get to write op-eds. They get to extend their project. Now, this is not colorblindness. This is an anti-Black racial project that is cloaked in the discourse of colorblindness. But at the end of the day, it's all about the idea that Black people are less than. It's all about the continuation of the basic ideology that allowed us to be enslaved. That narrative has never been substantially interrupted, which is why this is not a left-right problem. Yeah. This is across the board. There are elements of MAGA thinking about us that we can find all the way to the far left of American society. So to think that this is all about progressives, liberals, moderates, it's not about that. It's about anti-blackness and the way it continues to thrive in this country.
So,
I'm not supposed to be trapped.
we have a couple pretty good audience questions. I want to sort of give them an opportunity to be heard. I don't know which one to pick here. So there's a question here about journalists who were in the space, Nicole, of trying to cover, quote unquote, the Black beat, of trying to cover our stories. And in what you've just described, Kimberly, is the recruitment of media itself into the anti-Black campaign, the recruitment of media itself into our erasure. So if you are a Black journalist, Nicole, that's working in specifically in a space where this is what you're covering, you're trying to cover us, where does that leave you?
On Substack? No, I'm saying.
Not a bad place to be.
Just kidding, sort of. So one, I mean, I'm sitting on stage with someone who clearly fell victim to that counter correction, right? And I think you have demonstrated what one can do, but you already had such a big platform. I don't think that's possible for most journalists who are struggling against this. I also want to say, like, I don't have the Black beat, right?
Yeah.
Like, writing about race is largely not even writing about us. My work has been like critiquing and exposing and investigating the structures that lead to the inequality, and actually really, really trying to take the race beat from being about superficial coverage of Black malady to actually exposing the people, the institutions, and the policies that lead to it. And I think that's, I would hope, one of the reasons I'm still seen as an essential voice, even in a time when we're seeing the shrinking of that. So one, what I tell Black journalists is arm yourself with trying to be the best at what you do. That it's not just about seeing a story that other people aren't seeing, but exposing. Like, if you're presenting an investigation to your editors, the race part becomes less important. Right? So you have to understand, what are their objections going to be? What are the things that they're going to use to shoot down your coverage and to try to make that coverage more essential? But I'm also like, if anybody has ever seen me talk ever in life, you know I'm not sugarcoating anything. These are challenging times. The reason that we see really efforts to attack the press and to erase our history is you erase history so you can erase rights. You erase our ability to tell our own stories and push back against these narratives, because that's the first step in making the erasure of the rights possible. And this is, again, to me, where history matters. We've been taught now to think of abolitionists, right, as the people who fought for equality. We need to understand that the left in this country has always suffered from a racial problem. There's a difference between saying, I don't believe in this brutal practice of slavery, and saying, I believe Black people are my equal.
That's that.
And are deserving of being in all the spaces that I should be. The North did not allow Black people to vote during slavery. And in fact, the white Southerners would make a critique of the North and say, the only reason that you are so egalitarian about race is there's no Black people up there and you don't have to deal with those folks. And as soon as Black people started trying to cross the border after slavery, you saw the Black codes being passed in the North. You saw places in the North not allowing Black people to attend public schools because they knew we wouldn't move to places where our children couldn't be educated. Look at Ohio and the practices of these free states. Look at Illinois. And so we've got to be able ourselves, if you don't know that history, how can you imbue that history in your reporting? How can you create that analysis to make yourself, I mean, nobody is not expendable in these times, none of us, but there are things within our control. And the way that I've always approached it as a journalist is, I can't control what not one newsroom is going to do. I can't control what a newsroom leader is going to do, but I can do my best to make myself non-expendable through my practice. So we are going to, we know this. We have to work twice as hard. We know this. We shouldn't have to, but if there was ever a time, I just feel too many of us, even in this room, don't understand the stakes of the moment that we're in. Most of us in this room, we have never lived in the country that we're about to be living in.
That's right.
Our parents did, our grandparents did, but we haven't. I've never lived in a country that didn't have affirmative action until now. I've never lived in a country where I didn't have the protection of the Voting Rights Act until now, right? We were all born after that or at that time, right?
Some of us were.
Right. You were born at the time.
Right.
So I don't even know the answer, I guess. That's when I start rambling. It's like, I don't know the answer, because I think if we don't understand how dangerous this moment is, I'm looking out at Roland, and I'm looking at somebody who is trying to build a strong black press. We do have to be in these mainstream institutions, absolutely. We don't want to cede that ground, but we're also going to have to understand that the jobs that were once there are not going to be there.
That's right.
And that if we're going to want to get our stories out, and I don't mean content creators, we are journalists.
That's right.
We are journalists. Content creators take our work and produce content, but somebody has to be on the ground actually reporting, asking questions, doing the investigations. And so I have to tell my students all the time, this is how I know I'm old. I have to tell my students all the time when they're like, oh, how can I make my brand? The brand is the work.
That's right. That's right.
You don't have a brand. You have done nothing to acquire brand.
That's right. That's right.
But the thing that will sustain you in this dark times is making your work essential. It may not be essential for a mainstream newsroom, but it will be essential for our community. So to me, that's all we have right now is put your dollars and your support in the places that you know are serving you. Invest, right? Like, you take subscribers. To do your work, you need subscribers. For Roland to do his work, he needs subscribers. They then can hire the journalists who are being purged from other institutions. And if you're in those institutions, one thing I can say about me, I've never sold myself out, not one day. If you know me, you know this. If I can't cover the things I got into this to cover, then I don't need to work for you. And so some of us have to be willing in this time to make a stand about what we're going to accept to be done in our names. Like, we do actually have power. I think sometimes we forget that we do. Whether we're in their newsrooms or ours, we have power to determine that only us can cover the things that we can cover the way that we will. But then we have to do that.
And let me just add to this, because everything you say, 100%. And resist anticipatory compliance.
Yes.
I mean, that is the touchstone of fascism. The willingness to give before the demand even happens. So when you're doing a story on a racial topic, or you're doing a story on critical race theory, and they say you don't need to talk to any critical race theorists, all you need to do is talk to Christopher Rufo, and that has happened many times. Resist that.
That's right.
Understand that you can't cover a story without knowing the content of what it actually is about. This is one of the reasons, shameless plug, why my book, Backtalker, American Memoir, is a memoir, because the story framed the work that we did as foreign, as un-American. Critical race theory, intersectionality are as American as apple pie and the lynching rope.
That's right.
You can't get away from it by saying that ain't got nothing to do with us. This is the way Black people survive. You said one thing just a couple minutes ago, you got to be twice as good to go half as far. That's critical race theory. That's critically thinking about what it means to be a Black body in a post-enslavement society. These are the ideas that you are in the best position to learn. You got to get close to the history. You got to get close to the sacred ground. You got to go to Legacy Museum. Go to where Brian Stevenson is telling the real truth in order to touch that space again. That's what we're going to need to survive.
I'm sorry I didn't get to more of y'all questions, but we were in class here today. Y'all, the exam will be in a half an hour. You're welcome. Thank you for coming to our university. Kimberly Crenshaw and Nicole Hannah-Jones, these divas, please give them a round of applause. And tell them.
And we're not done yet. NABJ, please welcome to the stage journalist and author of the book Love Me, Tiffany D. Cross.
Good morning, NABJ. It's so nice to see this room so full today, and so nice to be in community with all of you. For a little over 40 days now, we've all been thinking the same thing. Somebody must know something. And the question we're pondering is, what happened to Nolan Wells? On Friday, July 3rd, the 18-year-old, who would have turned 19 just a little under a week from today, made dinner for his family that evening, and he spent the night with friends. On Saturday, July 4th, just before 10 a.m., Nolan set out for Horn Island. Now, Horn Island is a barrier island about 10 miles off the coast of Mississippi. It's a popular hangout spot, big with boaters. About an hour and 20 minutes later, the boat with Nolan and his friends arrived at Horn Island. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office says that Nolan was seen there around 3 that afternoon. At 5:44 that evening, records show that the boat that carried Nolan to Horn Island made it back to the mainland. Again, that was 5:44. We're talking just over 2 hours. Now, his family reported him missing around 11 that night, and this was after one of his traveling companions called the family, alerting his mother. By Sunday, Nolan's family is, of course, understandably frantic. They're retracing his steps, they're posting online, as we often have to do with missing Black children. What happened to Nolan Wells? Well, by Monday, July 6th, the news that Nolan's family feared the most, the remains of Nolan Wells had been recovered on the shore of Horn Island. What happened to this boy? NABJ, I want to bring to the stage 2 people who want answers to that question more than anyone. His mother and father, Christine Wells Wansley and Elmore Wansley, joins the stage now. You'll sit there and there. And they are joined by civil rights attorney Ben Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton. Thank you all for being here. I know you've been on a whirlwind. I know you've been traveling a lot. So thank you all. And I know you all have other challenges happening around the country that you'll be getting to after this. But we are all so honored to meet you. And we are so saddened that we are connecting with you under these circumstances. You know, I want to tell you, they asked me to call them Christine and Elmore. I want to say Mr. and Mrs. Wansley, but Christine and Elmore. I want to tell you in the audience in this room, but also watching at home, are thousands of Black journalists. But in addition to being Black journalists, these are mothers and fathers, siblings, cousins, aunts and uncles of Black children. And we see your humanity. And we're going to center that in this conversation. There you go. Here. I told Christine if we cry on this stage, it's okay, because we're among family.
Amen.
So you take your time. Christine, I'm going to start with you. On Friday, July 3rd, Nolan made you dinner. And so as you're telling us about the last time you saw your baby boy, I want you to talk to us about who Nolan was and tell us about that day.
So Nolan is and was an incredible, just incredible soul. He was the person who, no matter where you were in life or what was going on, he was going to be your biggest cheerleader. And I can attest to that because after COVID, my sister was like, oh, you should do social media. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do social media. I like to just watch others. And then Nolan was like, no, Mom, you should do it. I'll help you with the videos. I got you. And, just anytime I was like, oh, I just really don't want to do this anymore, Nolan was like, no, Mama, you haven't posted today. And I'm like, I don't want to post. I'm tired.
Yeah.
But, that's the kind of person he was. He was God-fearing, God-loving. That boy had faith beyond measure. He was just a bright light. And he was our bright light. As far as that day goes, went to work, and he was making salmon. So he was FaceTiming me as I'm trying to see patients kind of in between, of course, not answering the phone in the room. And he's like, hey, Mama, how does this look? Is this enough season? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And I was like, okay. I was like, you don't have to do that. And he's like, no, I'm going to take care of it. I was like, okay, sure. And so he finishes cooking, get home. He's like, yeah, what you know about this? And he was, guys, when I tell you, he loved to joke. Like, he was just one of those people. He wanted everyone around him to smile, be happy, feel comfortable and accepted. And that is the kind of person God made him. Us as parents, we definitely had that influence, but Nolan was just naturally a peacemaker.
Yeah.
And so after that, it was, 8, and then he got ready to go. He did his normal, hugged us up. I love you, Mom. I was like, be safe, knowing this was going to be his last weekend before going back to school, because football was starting, the summer training was starting. And this was his second year at Southwest. And so we knew this was going to be a big year for him. Dad and him had been training and doing all these things and really just kind of sitting with him and letting him know, like, hey, we're going to the next stage in your life as well as, your football career. So the focus was there, and he was ready.
So he leaves that day.
He leaves that day with, he drives his car, and he told us kind of a general, like, hey, we're going to go to the island. Like, we knew that. I'm staying at Jack's house. And Jax was a friend I think we've met in passing before. And that's the thing, I always say there's a difference in meeting someone, knowing of someone, and then knowing someone. Knowing implies that we've sat down, we've had discussions about your hopes, your dreams, knowing you, okay, hey, he stayed the night at my house, which Wyatt, one of his friends, he had stayed at our house a couple of times. And then Jax, again, that was one I just maybe saw in passing a few times. There was only a handful of young men that we actually knew, like, he grew up with. And when I say grew up, I'm saying from like first grade, they've known each other all through high school now that they're graduated. And that would be like Jalen and Javon, LeBaron. Those are kids that we knew. So it's been hard seeing all this kind of play out.
Yeah.
And these are people that he considered friends.
Yes. Dad, I want to ask you, because it was Warren Hudson, one of the people that he traveled with, who called to alert you all that Nolan was missing.
Yes.
So we know at 5:44, the boat returns, Nolan is not there. At 11 p.m., he calls to say Nolan is missing. I wonder if either of you, whoever wants to answer, what happened in those few hours that prompted Warren to be concerned?
I'm not quite sure what would prompt him to be concerned, but all I can say is what I did that day. So me and my sister, we made an order of pancit, which is a Filipino noodle dish for one of our friends. They were having a big family get together, and we really didn't have anything planned for the 4th. So me and my sister are, cleaning up, and this is about 8. And she's like, hey, Nolan hasn't texted us. And that was the thing, Nolan was really big with communication with us, right? And so I call him, doesn't answer, I end the call. call back, and this is probably, I think, maybe around 8. Don't quote me on the times, guys. So then I call again later around 8, still no answer. And then I want to say I called one more time, and I think that was at like 10:48. So I'm in the kitchen, my phone rings. Now this is probably like early 11 o'clock, somewhere around there. Phone rings when I make it back to the phone, and I'm like, whose number is this? Because, you know, we get weird phone calls sometimes. They didn't leave a message. Number pops back up. I pick up the phone because it says maybe Warren. And I'm like, Warren? So this is 11:07. That's per my cell phone records. So I answer the phone. He's like, hey, Miss Christine, have you seen or talked to Nolan? I said, no. Why? He should be with you guys. And he said, oh, no, well, you know, when we went to the island, there was a girl named Katie that he met, and he had decided to stay behind. And I said, what? Because we know our child. And Nolan isn't one to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to throw caution to the wind, and I'm going to stay here with this girl that I just met. So I'm on the phone with him. Now I'm in a panic. I'm running into my room. Elmore was in bed watching a different movie, and I'm like frantic. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, Nolan is missing. I'm trying to pull up the GPS as I'm talking to him. And at some point, he tells me that, I was like, well, you know, his phone says GPS Life 360, not Snapchat.
Right.
Life 360 says that he's on land. And he was like, well, no, I mean, you know, well, we have his phone. And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, okay. Because at that point, you're telling me, this is coming from Warren, don't worry about it. We're going to find him. It's going to be okay. Don't tell me not to worry. This is my child, my flesh and blood that I brought into this world. And you're telling me not to worry. Absolutely not. So then it was after the phone call ended, of course, asking him for information. What was he wearing? He was like, last seen, Northwest tip, black shorts, sunglasses. That's important. So I end up calling DMR, spoke with the DMR. She took all
Just for our audience, DMR.
So DMR is because he went missing on the island. They are basically the marine people, right? They're the ones who's going to launch the boats to go into the water and all that. But before getting off the phone with Warren, he was like, hey, I know some people at Coast Guard. I said, okay. He's like, I'm gonna call Coast Guard, you call DMR. Get on the phone with DMR. I give the young lady the information, and she tells me, hey, you know, I got this. Let me call you back, because she was like, I'm not sure if this is gonna be in our jurisdiction, essentially. So then she calls back and she tells me, okay, yeah, you know, we spoke with Coast Guard. And I'm like, okay, but they're like, this isn't our jurisdiction. You have to contact the city of Ocean Springs. I said, okay, hang up the phone, call an Ocean Springs Police Department. They say, hey, you have to physically come down and give a report. I said, okay. So on our way, because we don't live that far from the police station, on our way there, I was like, well, let me stop by the hospital, because there's a hospital that's maybe 5 minutes up the road from our house. Stop by there. I'm like, hey, have you guys seen this kid? Has he been brought in? The lady's like, no, ma'am, you know, we hadn't. I said, okay, thank you. Run out, we go to the police department. Get to the police station, and the officer basically says, again, this is out of our jurisdiction. And at that point, I'm like, my God, who am I supposed to talk to? Who is supposed to help me with this? So then he said, it's going to be, you would have to call DMR. I was like, we've already called DMR. DMR said it's not in their jurisdiction. So we end up, I think at some point I had called Jackson County Sheriff's Office, yeah. So she calls back and she's like, hey, are you there? I said, yes, we're here, but he's telling us the same thing you guys told us, which is no, we can't take it. She gets on the phone with the police officer. Now this is Jackson County Sheriff's Department speaking with the Ocean Springs Police Department. Ocean Springs Police Department is saying, this is why we can't take this information. She says, okay. He gives me the phone back, and she's like, okay, I'm just gonna take it. I'm just gonna take the information, And that was, we met an officer, it was after midnight. Right? Yeah, it was somewhere after midnight. Met him in the McDonald's parking lot, gave him the information. He was just like, okay, thanks. I was like, like, where is the urgency? And so, as far as we know, there were no boats on the water that night. We actually, his high school football coach, Coach Bramlett, texted Elmore that morning. He said, hey man, I got a boat. Because again, we don't have boats. Let me make that very clear. We do not have a boat. We're not boating people. We don't do water like that, okay? So Coach Bramlett's like, hey, I got a boat. So we was like, great, let's go. We're on the water. We go out there. We walk the island. Cell phone works perfectly fine. I actually had almost an entire conversation with my grandmother who was in a panic as we're walking this island looking for anything.
I just want to pause there. The cell phone worked fine because in the reporting, there's been so much reporting that there's poor cell phone reception. And this is some of the disputes that we have about that night. Dad, feel free to jump in here because they're saying he met this young lady, Katie, and that he stayed back. According to the reporting, Katie is saying no. He said he was going to go with his friends. According to the reporting, the friends say no, he left us his phone because there was no reception. Dad, have you found any consistencies? Have you spoken directly with any of his friends?
Well, the first inconsistency was you called me and tell me my son stayed on the island to talk to a girl. My son would never do that. That's not in his character. I didn't raise none of my kids to do that. The second thing is, you say he doesn't have his phone. He doesn't leave his phone. I would wake up sometimes in the morning and Nolan would have his phone here right in my face. And I'm waking up cussing and fussing like, boy, you don't get the camera on my face. And he just laughing and giggling and stuff like that. So that's twice. To me, there's two lies that he told me as a father. Like I said, we went on the island. And actually, a classmate of mine called me that morning as we were going out to the island with Nolan's coach. He's like 40 miles away. He calls and, hey man, I got the boat. Me and my boys, we're gonna go out there and help you look. I didn't call him, he called me. And we're gonna start on this end. I said, well, we're probably gonna start on the other end. So me, my wife, Coach Bramlett, and a high school classmate of mine were the only, we were the first ones out there looking. Like I said, we docked the boat, got out the boat, walked on the island. She had a whole conversation with her grandmother on the island, got back on the boat, went back around the island. I guess that would be the north side, facing the Gulf of Mexico. I get another phone call. So my phone worked fine. So this whole thing about not having phone service, I don't know. I don't know if it's the carrier or what, but ours worked fine. I think that was around maybe 8 o'clock.
Yeah, because we finished up around.
Who was it, Jackson County or the?
Yeah, Jackson County Sheriff.
Finally showed up.
Yeah.
A couple of boats, they finally showed up. By that time, I was like, he's not out here. I was more focused that he was at someone's house.
That was the
So, that's where my hopes and feelings were. So we left. The county stayed out there. My friend, he stayed out there because he called. He was like, well, we're gonna stay out here a little bit longer. I said, okay, I appreciate it. So we leave. Then I would say maybe a couple hours later, my friend calls me back and he would say, well, we're gonna give it and go, but he said, look, I can gas the boat back up, and if you wanna go back out there, we can go back out there. I said, I don't wanna go back out to the island. I have a feeling that he's not there, and I don't wanna go back to the island. So he offered, he said, well, if you do, we can go right now. I said, don't worry about it, I appreciate you coming out there. But he said at that time that helicopters were out there, more Coast Guard, more people were out there. So we get back on land, and as far as the keys, I don't know. I don't know if it's the carrier or what, but ours worked fine. I think those around maybe 8 o'clock. Who was it, Jackson County or the?
Yeah,
Finally showed up. A couple of boats, they finally showed up. By that time, I was like, he's not out here. I was more focused that he was at someone's house. So was it that night? Or was it?
That was that night.
That was the
it
night
like
the call. Okay, let me back
early.
up. As far as getting the car back, after we gave our report to Jackson County, the sheriff department that night, we were trying to figure out who to get a report to. We had a friend in the family that located his phone.
Mm-hmm.
We wasn't there to get the phone, but apparently there was some kind of friction with getting his phone.
Yeah.
We don't
And it
know
was
what the friction
so
was.
the phone and the key were at the same location, which was Jack's house.
Okay.
And again, all of these kids share their locations on Snapchat. And so she was like, hey, I can go pick his phone up, not thinking that his car is there, you know, which she stopped everything she was doing. Her and the boys, they went out. Like, we were all out searching for him that night. And yeah, like Elmore was saying, there was an issue, some type of friction. The cops ended up coming and they left. And so then kind of the same thing when we came to pick up the key, Elmore went up there asking for the key, didn't know where the key was, and all of a sudden we know where the key is.
But see, hold on. But see, this is another thing that bothered me too. When we got to the house, you know, it was some of his other friends were there, you know, and they were, you know, beating on the door like, "Where Nolan there? Where Nolan there?" You know, beating on the door trying to get in the house. So I walk up to the door and I'm calming them down, because for one, okay, you're loud. Two, you're in these people's house. So if you tear these people's house up, that's gonna be a whole nother issue. I don't want y'all bothering it. And three, I need you guys to calm down, and I need them to kind of trust me as being an adult so I can get something out of them. So I get them out the house, and then Jax finally comes down the stairs, I guess in the room. Hair all messed up like he just woke up, whatever. I said, look, I'm Nolan's father. His car's outside. I need to get his car and all his personal effects that may be left over here. And he goes, oh man, Nolan was like my brother. I said, Nolan was like my brother. I said, well, if Nolan was like your brother, would you please go and get everything of his so I can get his car, I can go home. So he walks off. 2 or 3 minutes later, he come back. I don't see the keys. Okay. So I leave out the house, go back outside, stand by the car. During that time, one of the guys that was in the house, one of the other friends, he was on the phone with a girl who was apparently there with them earlier that day. And she was telling him that his keys was on top of the Xbox in his room. So he goes back up to the door by himself, and we're still out by the car. And lo and behold, here comes the keys. So now to me, you lied to me 3 times. I don't believe nothing that you tell me from here on out.
And this is Jax.
This is Jax.
And eventually he does give you the keys.
Yeah, eventually give me
But
the
there
keys.
was friction getting the keys.
Yes. So for one, you tell me my son is on left still on the island with a girl. 2, you have his phone. And 3, you don't give me the keys when I ask. I don't know any father who would believe, just if one of my friends did that. I'm gonna be cordial with you, but I'm gonna watch you. And
Ben, I want to ask you, because I'm hearing these 2 parents who essentially had to become search and rescue or law enforcement, looking for their own child with such a lack of urgency on behalf of law enforcement. Obviously, we're talking to Black journalists. We can't ignore the ugly racial history of Mississippi. I looked into the demographics of the Jackson County Sheriff Department. It's quite asymmetrical, but also just the general attitude and the lack of value when it comes to Black life. Does this sound like a normal process for when an 18-year-old goes missing to you? What holes have you seen in your looking into this case?
Tiffany, that was the question that Christine and Elmore had when they first called us. They wanted the truth of what happened to their 18-year-old son, Nolan Wells. And they had concerns whether they were going to get a fair and impartial investigation. And from that day to this one, it has been the same objective: to have truth, transparency and find out what happened to Nolan. They said, we want a thorough investigation, because when they found Nolan, they expressed to me that the sheriff had already said no foul play.
Few hours.
And they was like, no, my son, he knows how to swim. Our son is a college athlete. Our son is in great shape. We don't believe that he just drowned and nobody knows nothing. Nobody saw nothing. I mean, there are about 300, 400 people on the island. And so that's what they were saying. We want to know what happened. We want truth. We want transparency. We don't want his death to be swept under the rug.
Well, just so to make sure the audience and the people watching at home know, so they did declare very quickly, as you're noting, that he drowned when his body was recovered on July 6th. Mom and Dad and you all know that he is a student athlete, able to swim. On July 4th on Horn Island, it was very crowded. Certainly the suggestion is someone would have seen a child in distress. There is going to be the convening of a grand jury. Now, the DA of this area, Angel Myers McElrath, is a very out loud, proud Republican. If there is a U.S. attorney appointed to this case, it will likely be a Trump appointee. I'm just curious, Ben, from you and Rev, I think we have to be very candid here. What concerns do you have about the racial animus that we are seeing so much of play in this case?
Well,
you or Rev, whoever.
All I'll say, and then defer to Rev, you want to believe that this is a child, that everybody is going to do their level best to find out what happened, so these broken-hearted parents will know what happened to their child. In time, we've seen Christine and the family be attacked just for asking questions. What happened to my child? Trying to say, no, we want to question this part of the investigation, that part of the investigation, because day one you said no foul play, but tell me now, what are you doing to be able to get us to the truth? And that is, it causes them sleepless nights. We talk at night. And so, trust but verify. We are trying to cooperate everything we can do to say, hey, we want to help, but we want you to give them a thorough investigation. We want you to do for him what you would do for your child.
Rev, I'm going to come to you in a sec, but you brought up something, Ben, about attacks. And certainly as journalists, we have a keen eye, and I have noticed that the narrative around this story has shifted to the threats that are going to the young men who was with Nolan. They've hired attorneys who previously represented Donald Trump in cases. They've gone on very MAGA-friendly podcasts. And I just want to make sure that we keep the main thing, the narrative to the victim. To the actual child who died. And I'm curious, Christine, if you can weigh in on what threats have you and your family experienced?
So there have been a big smear campaign, just not only professionally, but personally for me. And
they attacked your nursing license.
Yes, so it started out with 1-star reviews of people saying they saw me. My office verified that these were incorrect. And then it went so much as to someone contacted the Board of Nursing, and then that opened the investigation for the professional misconduct. There was no evidence presented for that claim. And the investigator I spoke with, he said, we have to do our due diligence. I said, I understand it, I respect it. He was like, I'm sorry it's coming at this time. I was like, no, I get it, do what you have to do, because I know who I am. I know what kind of care I give to my patients. I know the relationship that we have. And I'm grateful that my patients, a lot of them, are still trusting and loving in the care that they know they're gonna get with me. And so these attacks are not going to, it's not going to break me. I have to find out. We have to find out what happened to Nolan. That is the only question we've ever asked. We've never blamed anyone. We've never tried to smear anyone. I know I heard something about the picture. That picture was sent to me because
This is the picture of him on the boat.
On the boat with the people.
Yes.
And what it was is they were like, the person was like, Miss Christine, the information is incorrect. This is what he was wearing. Because initially he was in black shorts, which again, that is the information I received from Warren, verbally and via text. When she sent me that picture, I was like, oh, completely different color. These are like a blue-gray short. So we had to correct that. But I'm grateful, we are grateful to all of you. Thank you for keeping our son's story alive. And thank you so much, Tiffany, for having us.
I think that's part of our assignment here, our responsibility. So often in newsrooms, we have to defend and define Black life and defend and define our own humanity. And so it makes a difference. The same way in other newsrooms, when you see someone and you feel like they're familiar, that so happens as they resegregate newsrooms and lay off Black journalists en masse, that goes away. So the people in this room have a keen interest in this story because they see your humanity, and that's what we center in this conversation. Rev, put this in historical context for us, because as I look at Mississippi, I don't have to tell you of all people some of the immediate thoughts that surface for us here.
Well, when I got the call from Ben Crump and he had the parents connected, and they told me the story, I'd not heard the story. I heard something about some in Mississippi. But when I heard the details, the thing that jarred me from a civil rights point of view, and I've been working, Ben has come National Action Network for 20-some years with a case, and then from there on and on and on. And if it's not a civil rights position, we don't get involved. When they told me that law enforcement said there is no foul play, that's a prejudgment. And I said, wait a minute. They said, the parents repeated to me on the phone, I said, they said it was, this 2 days after it happened. And how do you investigate and there's no foul play and you don't even know what happened yet? So that's what perked my interest. So I said that, well, we'll be involved and we'll help to the best of our ability. Talked another day or two. I said, y'all come to New York, we'll have a national press conference. That's how we broke the story. The first national press conference they did at our headquarters, National Action Network. And then all of a sudden, it was all of this attack for getting involved. And they asked me to do the eulogy. I said, we'll take care of the funeral. Tyler Perry called me and said, no, I'll take care of it. So the thing that bothered me, one, it was prejudgment. Second, the parents of the guys that were with him start talking about they was gonna sue us for getting involved. And sue, I don't even know the kid's name. So you can't say I defame your son. I don't know your son's name. But I will say this on this stage, I want them to sue me first. And I'll tell you why. No, I'll tell you why. And National Action Network, you serve the papers, because I want to depose your son. If you sue, the plaintiffs are deposed. So rather than us depend on a Mississippi DA who's already had people saying it was no foul, let's go to civil court, any kind of court you want to go to, because you can't make this make sense. And direct to your point, Tiffany, as I said in the eulogy that I did, I don't know what happened. The parents never said they knew what happened. They never said it was racial. I don't know it was racist. But they don't know it wasn't racist. You don't know what happened. So why are you prejudging it unless something is there you don't want out? Second thing is, and I said this to Elmer and Kristen, I had hurt my knee. I had torn my meniscus. And when I tore it, I told Ben the truth. I did it working out one morning, but I told them I got it because I was on my knees praying too much. But anyway, when they took me to say they may have to do surgery, the first thing they said is, well, we got to get your medical history from your primary doctor. I said, okay. So I said in the eulogy that I don't know what happened, but I got your history in Mississippi. And the history tells me black boy go out with 3 white kids come back. There's a blurred story on what happened. Now y'all all hostile and all upset. Didn't have the keys, but then you had the keys. Some about this don't make sense given your history. And I'm gonna stay on this until we find out what happened. It may be nothing, but we're not gonna leave that up to chance with people that are distorted. We gonna stay on this case. And lastly, since they want to talk about lawsuits, one of the things tying your morning together, Tiffany, they may come back, as you suggested, playing right-wing politics with this, with the local prosecutor, maybe even with the federal people. But if we have a change in January and there is a Democratic House, I said that if Hakeem becomes the speaker, he needs to have the chair judiciary subpoena them to the Judiciary Department, testify. No, that's what this vote means. We need to have a check and balance of government so that we got somewhere to go. We can't depend to go to Trump's Justice Department. So we need to really mobilize so people like these 2 parents can protect their children.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you laid out such a great example on how the tentacles of white supremacy cast such a dark shadow over almost every aspect of what your parents went through. I know that there's so many more questions that I have, and I'm sure the audience has. As all my broadcasters know, I have an IFB, and they've been telling me to rap for about 10 minutes. We wanted. It was my pleasure to go over time, and not only my pleasure, my responsibility to give you all a platform to share your story. I think it's so important, and I think this is the responsibility that the Black journalists in this room take very seriously and will carry with them back to their newsrooms where they may be the only, or back to their platforms where they are building reach or have a wide reach. So I thank you all for sharing your time and being so open. There will be a press conference. There was an autopsy, a second autopsy that Ben Crump initiated that I believe Colin Kaepernick helped to fund. There were questions around that, and so please, I encourage credentialed media to please go to the press conference, and the access for credentialed media will be on the NABJ app for more information. So I don't want you all to think I didn't have more questions, but I passed the baton to you all to go ask all the additional questions. And I just want to thank all of you all sincerely for being here, and I want to thank you, NABJ, for being such an attentive audience. Please welcome back to the stage NABJ President Aaron Haynes. You want to do photos? You were so great. President Aaron, say hi to the Wells family. Thank you.
It's not on. They can't hear anymore. Oh, now you can hear again. Before you all get out of here, there's just a couple of things I want to say before we leave. That was a very powerful morning. I appreciate y'all for being here. I want to acknowledge Congresswoman Lucy McBath, who is with us in the audience today. We just heard from the parents of Nolan Wells on this stage, and Congresswoman McBath's own journey and her powerful advocacy on gun violence and justice make her presence especially meaningful. I also want to recognize Jesse Jackson Jr., who is also with us today. I'm not sure if he's still in the room, but his father, thank you so much. Your father, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, long understood and championed the essential role of the Black press, not simply in reporting our history, but in helping our communities understand the stakes of the moment and holding power accountable. So we are deeply grateful for that legacy and partnership, and I want to say that to you and your family. One more thing. Later today at 3:30 p.m., NABJ will hold a press conference following a private meeting I will hold with civil rights leaders about what this moment demands from journalism and where we are falling short, what stories need more urgency and depth, and how NABJ can be a stronger partner in the fight for truth and accountability. So that's going to be held. The room is International 8 through 10 on the international level of this hotel. You can see the NABJ app to get your credentials for that. And you can also contact comms@nabj.com. So I want to thank our newsmaker guests this morning, the parents of Nolan Wells, Ben Crump, the Reverend Al Sharpton, Nicole Hannah-Jones, Kimberly Crenshaw, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. I also want to thank my fellow moderators, Tiffany Cross and Joyanne Reed. Ladies and gentlemen, you can please look out for updates throughout the convention in your NABJ 26 mobile app. And remember, this is our truth, this is our power, and this is our revolution.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.